Hey, welcome back to Back Issues with Marco and Eric Hurd, or Eric Hurd and Marco. This was supposed to be a bi-weekly show. I think it's turning into more like a once a month, but maybe we'll pick it back up afterwards. Well, this week, or time issue, episode 3, we're going to talk about Whitman Variants. Obviously, when we talk about Whitman Variants, I'm going to talk about kind of some of the company infrastructure and the breakdown of distribution, and then Eric's going to ask some questions, and then he's going to talk about, a couple of the other finer points of it. So let's kind of get into it. You ready, Eric?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
All right. So first off, Whitman as a whole, probably one of the older publishing / distribution companies. Is a publisher, distributor, and a printer of all types of things, like books, puzzles, stuff like that. Multiple things. The subsidiaries of them pretty much linked up was Western Printing and Golden Key, and you'll know those from like a lot of the license that those groups had were pretty much the the Looney Tunes, like the little like Donald Duck and all that type of stuff. All the stuff that ended up turning to cartoons, plus Westerns, plus like real photo, like TV story type comic books and adventures and stuff like that. Gold Key eventually turned into Dell, as you guys know, and then it went into the Whitman comic like distribution group. Actually, kind of like when Mattel eventually ended up taking over that portion of it. But like, it's very kind of important that like Whitman was its own printer at the time too, which helped with the distribution and everything else. Out of Wisconsin, could do a Midwest thing. And when we look at kind of where'd you get this graphic from?
Oh, let me see. Oh, that one came from Whitman Info, I believe. It's a comic book.
WhymanInfo.com, I think is what it is. And so go check them out if you want to look at that.
They got some pretty good articles over there. One of them's on Whitman's and a couple different subjects.
But when we start talking about the Whitman distribution, we really want to talk about like the 3-pack and how that kind of got formed. So we're going to be starting around like the late 60s, going into the 70s, right? Did you want to cover this graphic for a little bit?
Well, yeah, the Whitman first started distributing comics for Marvel, and I think there were 4-packs originally. I can't zoom in on the graphic, but you can later if you want. But it's from 68, 69-ish.
It was, yeah.
And then they, as you can see on the graphic, I don't think there was anything going on in the 69 to 72 era. If it might have been distributed by Marvel themselves, because sometimes they distributed through Whitman, sometimes they didn't.
Yeah, so that was also kind of like an interesting error too, because at that time, DC was also trying to have Whitman distribution, but they were trying to flood them. So I think that might have had something to do with it in that error. Plus, I know that like some of the stuff, especially at the end of the 70s, that was running through Gold Key, the licensings were coming up on it. Plus, you had cartoons and stuff. So some of the comics weren't the comics that Whitman or Gold Key at the time. I'm just going to use them as one universal. So just so everybody knows, like when I refer to Whitman, I'm Gold Key too, that they're having, like Daffy Duck or like, whatever the other little kitty cartoon shows were actually cartoons. So more kids were interested in that, where superheroes were doing a bit better, and they didn't really have a corner market on that. So I think that's where you kind of see the gap between 69 and 72, is because distribution as a whole was changing. And at the same time, you have them starting to renegotiate some of their licensees.
Yep.
Was that so? Then 77 through 1980 was,
and that was the main era when we talk about, when people coin them Whitman variants. That's the era of the Whitman variant, as everybody likes to call them. That was when you got the 3-packs, and the only difference between those and the standard Marvel comics would have been you had the big diamond logo in the corner.
Yeah, so these were kind of some of the packs they got there. There you go.
Yep. And like I'm not sure if it was the first 4 to 6 months roughly. The covers are exactly the same. You'd have like your standard newsstand barcode in the bottom corner, but instead of your stacked rectangles in the top left, you'd have a large diamond. And that was how you could differentiate the Whitman from the standard newsstand.
Because remember, at the time, the standard newsstand, there's still, just people, sellers, newsstand people, or whatever, little comic book kind of pop up stores they would try to get it cheaper by any route possible. So, like, obviously, Whitman was a great way for them to try to con, because they would go and try to pull, a Whitman pack and pull the 3 books and go like, oh, I need a refund for all 3, because they were still doing refunds for newsstands at the time. So to divvy that up, obviously they added in the diamond size logo there, and then they moved on to. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yep. I mean, that's just an easy way to differentiate when you have a newsstand barcode, that you're not getting people trying to return the copies that are non-returnable, because these were non-returnable as well.
They were not, yeah, because they're cheaper, and you would, I mean, you had to rip off the top in some cases to send it back. So, like, how you can't send it a diamond, it wasn't the deal. So, but they still changed it a little bit more.
Yeah, like I said, the first 4 to 6 months had the newsstand barcode, but then later on, you see all the copies had the blank rectangle in the corner, where you would normally see a barcode, or later on, as we've covered in previous issues, the Spidey corner box.
Yeah, Spidey corner box.
And the other interesting thing is, did you notice in this one how it's a yellow diamond? There are multiple color variations on certain comics, where you would have white diamond, yellow diamond, I think orange diamond, red diamond. There's a multitude of colors, which I don't know how they determine which, or if it was something to do with the printing, but it's
probably regional.
There are different colors on different comics.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting what they did, because eventually, I mean, they teamed up shortly after this with Mattel. But before that happened, they were starting to lose the Star Trek licensee, and it was right around a time of like another certain book was coming out that I think he kind of, around that time frame, around the 77 time frame too, which I think you wanted to address.
Yeah, because the Whitmans first came out in February of 77, and they went all the way through April of 80, I believe. And then there were 3 gaps in printing, and the first one it was actually 78 they did it, not 77. It was January to March 78.
Right. Yeah.
And literally, the Star Wars movie had come out, of course, and it was such a big hit, and Marvel had the licensing to it, which I think Shooter was the one that got that deal for them, if I'm not mistaken, or was vital in getting the deal for Marvel. And then the first issue sold so well, which I think it sold over 1 million copies, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
That Whitman was like, we want to do 3-packs. So the first 3-pack, I believe, is issues 2, 3, 4, not 1, 2, 3.
2, 3, 4. Yep.
And I think that's what they sold for 3 months, and just kept telling them, we want more, we want more. And that gets into one of the misnomers. A lot of people had said, Whitmans are reprints, but they were actually printed at the same time as the newsstand copy. And this was reaffirmed from Jim Shooter himself. And what article was that? I'm trying to think. Oh, it was the Comic Buyer's Guide, number 1609, where he talked about all of the stuff with the Whitman variants, and how they came along and they made the deal with them.
But some of them early on, you're right, but Whitman did have reprints going later.
And that was what I was going to bridge on the Star Wars thing. Is the reason that they did do some reprints was because Whitman kept going back to Marvel, going, we want more copies, and they would just print, number 1 or number 2 or number 3, and put reprint. I think it was in the upper left-hand corner near the Luke box, or the box that had Luke on, I think.
Yeah.
And it would have reprint in them, and those are the only ones that are technically reprints that are Whitmans.
Which is funny.
The ones that I think are solely Star Wars, and I think they're just the ones that are like the first maybe 7 or maybe 5 or 6 issues.
Do you want to know the funniest thing about all that and how it works? as you say, they're going back to Marvel to ask for more printings. You know
Hmm.
who was printing them out?
No.
Western Printing, which was owned by Whitman, like by the parent
Ah,
company of Whitman.
gotcha,
I
gotcha,
mean,
gotcha.
that's where they did their printing out of. So like they'd have to go back and get the approval from Marvel to print out. Like how crazy is that? And by the way, how much trust do you have to have? I mean, I know it is because like they wouldn't do it or whatever. It's good as a handshake, whatever. But
Yeah.
like when people ask about numbers sometimes too, well, there's only so much paper left and there's a couple more, and if we accidentally just kind of just so happens that because they did their own distribution, right?
Well,
Like,
does that mean Whitman technically was making money on both ends?
well,
Because they
that
were
was
making
that was one of the perks of the deal of why they got to do Whitman 3-packs cheaper.
because they're making money on the printing side, and then they're making money on the distribution
So they're
side.
the printer, so they can get it cheaper.
Hmm.
Total. That's where their overall that it wasn't like Marvel was giving them a deal to do 3-packs. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
It was like a license per book, license per probably 10,000 or something like that. That's probably what they did. And they would be the printing company and they would be the distribution company. Because what Whitman did here was they started, they were already doing like puzzles and puzzle books and
Hmm.
like other type of like magazine and other type of printing stuff that you would see, like the stuff you see nowadays in drugstores in the big racks. Those are similar stuff that Western Printing and Whitman Distribution would do. um so yeah, I mean, they would just put it that's where they put it, in those areas. They put it in the drugstores, they put it in the hanger racks at the end of out here we have Myers or Kroger's or whatever, Farmer Jack's back in the day. They would put
Hmm.
them in those little end cap ringers because they were distributing all their other stuff there. So yeah, I mean that's why 3-packs were cheaper. They weren't cheaper because Marvel wrote them a deal or um, Whitman was getting a better deal than the newsstand people. They were literally cheaper because they were doing the work in distribution. So it was a
Yep.
one-stop shop.
Yep. And one of the other interesting things, if you look at the graphic we have up,
Mhm.
you know, when you started out with the multi packs, they looked like the first two that you see there, where it just had comic book on top and it was in the standard plastic.
Yeah,
But
here
once
I
they
got it
did,
close up.
yeah, just like that one on the right, but or the left. But once they started doing the Star Wars, if you flip back to the other one, you see how this Star Wars was just your standard packaging.
The three
They started
series.
they started doing custom packaging for the Star Wars ones, where it had Star Wars on the packaging.
Yeah. Oh, with
So
the black in the middle. Yeah, yeah.
yep. So
That's the reprint too of 1. So that came way after 2, 3, and
yeah. So
yeah.
they started marketing towards what they had in the packs because they wanted it to catch people's eyes, especially the Star Wars.
Mhm.
And then as you see the next one that's right there next to it, they started the same thing for other ones
With
like
Thor.
Thor and a
Yep.
couple other ones because they wanted it, to jump out at people.
Mhm. Dude, I I've found a couple in my time. I found a couple of Whitman packs. It not recently, but for a long time ago. And yeah, that ink definitely runs. And
Hmm.
it's definitely funny how you see how it sticks together in some of the other packs. But like, I mean, this is you've asked the question. What was the question about? You did ask a question about first directs, right? And I think we covered that. Like, it was the precursor to the direct market to see if they would actually work.
Yeah,
Uh,
like and we in our first issue we talked about the first directs with the Spidey corner box,
mhm.
which before that you had your direct editions with the standard newsstand barcode with your slash through it. But the Whitmans were really like almost like the guinea pig for the direct market, I'd say, because they were printed at the same time as newsstands,
Mhm.
but they were distributed like the directs were going to be distributed later on, and they had the different parts to the cover like they were going to do in the future with the uh, direct edition.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's really interesting. I'm just thinking about the timing because it's done in house,
Hmm.
or and how they would distribute newsstand. Huh. I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously it's a precursor to direct for sure, and they were just trying to figure out some of the kinks. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, it didn't work. I mean, Whitman had to sell out and stuff like that after that. These 3-packs were literally the lifeblood for a while. The comic packs were,
Oh, no
but
doubt.
um, and Jim Shooter was. I mean, it's Jim Shooter, so I mean, where did Jim Shooter? We should do a Jim Shooter show one day. Uh,
Oh,
just
there's
because, like,
there's
but
tons of info out there about him, and it's intriguing. Of
yeah,
when
liking or disliking him, he literally has got he had his hands in everything. I mean, everything. Dark. I mean, like he's just everywhere. So
yeah,
it's
because
just
we won't go too deep into it, but I think when he came on board in, I want to say it was 76, 77.
mhm.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's around there. Yeah,
Um,
76-ish, 7 through.
the
Um,
the I guess the trajectory Marvel was on changed dramatically once he got in there because he did a lot for him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like it had to be set. It was right after that year. It was right after the DC push, which once again we kind of think was between those 69 and 72. That's like a little inaccurate too of the amount of flow that they were trying to get Whitman to distribute for DC
Hmm.
because there are a lot of sides to that story, a lot of old men who see it different ways, and then when they were telling their stories, nobody's story lined up. The only lineup we know is that they actually kind of tried, it seems, um, intentionally or unintentionally, they tried to break Whitman's distribution network, by by just pure volume, which is crazy when you think about it. But it didn't work. Well, it kind of worked because they ended up losing licensing. But if that wouldn't have happened, we wouldn't have gotten these 3-packs and these value packs. I mean,
Yeah,
it
that's
wouldn't have
true.
been a thing.
Yep. And as you can see on the graphic, that once the, I guess, contract ran out with Whitman, that Marvel basically just started distributing their own comic packs.
I would wonder. I would wonder. Well, that timelines with a little bit of. I mean, that timelines with a little bit of Marvel and the distribution war. So like, I mean, when they're actually going direct to everything else. So like, I mean, Marvel. There's also the timeline. We've talked about this in Back's issues, didn't we? With distribution and what happened and
Yep.
how it was like regional, and then, but even Marvel started off their own distribution at one point. So that's right around that time too. Because why would you keep licensing out to Whitman when you're printing and distribute? You were doing the same thing that Western was, and it was easier for you to distribute at the time because that was what you thought you were going to do, which they ended up not doing, obviously, because of Giuseppe and Diamond. But
Yep.
uh,
And
yeah,
in that 81 period is when they really started ramping up the direct editions.
yeah, direct editions. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, they pretty much, like, I hate to say it, like, Whitman's super important for like, unfortunately, when you look at this, right? I mean, you're like 4 colors. Yeah, I got it. Okay, I understand all that. But like, when you look at, like, when you look back at Whitman, it's not a comedy. I don't know how to say it. It's not a comedy of errors, but it sure looks like every move they made, somebody was kicking them, like kicking it, like shaking their hand in the front, and then like the brothers, where you're like, oh hey, you're shaking his hand, and then you take your leg and you swoop kick him in the butt so nobody
Hmm.
sees you. That sure seems like what everybody's doing. DC was like, hey, help us distribute, and then they try to flood the network, so that Dell couldn't produce their own stuff, as the licensing, they're having licensing issues with some of the more cartoon characters that they own, because that was all the cartoons and westerns weren't doing good at the time. And then as soon as they figure out a way to get out of that, i.e. distribution for Marvel 3-packs, where we can print in house, distribute, bag in house, and distribute, and we have a distribute network already set up at drugstores and supermarkets, then Marvel decides, you know what, that's a good idea. We should really get into the direct market business. And they pretty much, I mean, you know, look, I mean, they put an end to it. Like, Marvel, at the same time that they're giving Whitman, they're licensing out Whitman 3-packs for Star Wars, they're also stealing the license for like the last. I mean, I hate to say it because it's a terrible property, but the last property that Whitman had that was anything was Star Trek, and they went for Gold Key, and Marvel's the one that, like, as they're going like, hey, it's 78, 79. Yeah, we know that Star Trek and our 3-packs are the only thing that's making you guys money, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to out negotiate you on the licensing for Star Trek, so you don't even own that property, the last fucking property to save you. And at the same time, we're going to then take away our 3-packs and distribute them ourselves and print them, find other printers to deal with that.
Yeah, here's a quick question.
Yeah.
Do you think that the fact that Mattel bought Whitman in somewhere around 79, 80 had anything to do with the split between Marvel doing Whitman and then having Mattel be the primary owner of them?
No, because Mattel was already using. They already had licensing going to Marvel.
Okay.
Didn't they at the time? Who was doing? Who did He-Man? Wasn't that Mattel?
I don't
Or was it
know off the top
Hasbro?
of my head. I think it was Hasbro
It's Hasbro.
because I
I
think
wonder.
Mattel did Star Wars.
No, that was Kenner.
Is that Kenner? Shoot, I don't
Yeah.
know who Mattel did.
That's an interesting. That's a kind of an interesting point. Like, is that why? Well, I mean, any way you look at it, I think Mattel was like a lifeline. I think they were just a lifeline because when Mattel was like, okay, you could distribute to these places, so we can now get like toy distribution and a couple other things in there. They just wanted the distribution network. I think. I don't think it had to deal with. That's why they broke up. I think.
But
Like I said,
it just seems like the timing's kind of weird because of them getting bought by Mattel, and then all of a sudden, or maybe it was a Mattel decision, not a Marvel decision. Could have been the other way around. Yeah, we don't want to deal with them. But it just seems like the timing of it being right there when they stopped distributing those packs.
I think, I don't. I think that's just. I think that might be just more
coincidence.
Yeah, like, hey, we see the writing on the wall because, like, for distribution to move, like, because who the heck didn't Marvel do the Barbie books? Either way,
I know at certain times they did.
Yeah, so like, I just think it's like, hey, the writing's on the wall here. We see what's going on. You know what I mean? We need to just salvage ourselves. And you got to think at the time, Whitman as a distribution still in the set. I mean, like, you're 79 to have regional and international or not countrywide distribution through. There's a lot more independent retailers at the time, right? Like, it's not everything's CVS. Not everything is like Wally World. You know what I mean? You had was A&P even at the time? A&P, was it Perry Drugs and Arbor Drugs, or it might have been Arbor? Yeah, Arbor and Perry were still split at that point. You had a ton of regional grocery stores.
Yeah, that's when you had Eckerd's and all the other different ones.
So, like, to get into all those places, and you got to think, Mattel had puzzles at the time, which Whitman could print, great at printing. Like, we sometimes get so almost tunnel vision because we're thinking about comics, and comics moves the markets, and comics this and comics that, and we forget, like, yo, dude, puzzle selling for as much as a comic book and costs like 0.1% of it, that's something that Mattel would be interested in. You know what I mean? Maybe put out their, like, coloring books. That's something they'd be interested in. All the other options that Whitman has to offer them would be a reason for them to buy. And at the same time, that's the year that they lost. The year Mattel took over is the year that Whitman lost Star Trek, their final property. So yeah, I mean, they're looking for anybody it's the cheapest point to kind of buy it, right? Like it's the cheapest point to get in there because Whitman's. I mean, what are they going to do? They have no 3-packs. They have no properties. What are you going to do? So I think that has more to do with that partnership than it did with Marvel and not wanting to work together. I think Marvel at that point, had already. That's what I'm saying. Like, unfortunately, I think Whitman shot themselves in the foot if they wouldn't have done the 3-packs. Which, I mean, it's the chicken or the egg. You don't do the 3-packs, you're done, right? Because all you have is Star Trek to distribute. But like, if you do the 3-packs, you show Marvel a pathway that they can get to direct marketing, direct distribution, direct comics, without taking a loss from the newsstand. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. You always come up with good, interesting questions that make me think, Eric.
Well, I mean, it's just something that popped into my head, and then you do reading, and you see all these little hints of information, and you just kind of wonder, does one thing lead to the other? Is one thing correlated with the other?
Yeah, I mean, and once again, in that case, I don't think it was. I think I think Marvel just was like, hey, why do we do this anymore? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we can do this ourselves.
Yeah,
We'll make more money off it.
I think that makes sense as well, especially with the direct market that they were trying to establish at that point in time. It was like, hey, we got this. We don't need, to pay somebody else to do what we're about to do.
Yeah, it's like they're letting them do the test run for them. And the reason why Mattel does the test run is, what do we have? We got nothing to lose. We either do it or we close our doors tomorrow. I mean, they're not going to close their doors, but they'll be completely out of the comic book market, and all they'll have left is puzzles and like some games and a couple other publishing, like not little brown books, little gold books or whatever, that type of stuff. Like, that's all they'll have left. Instead, they made a small fortune off of Star Wars and then reprinting Star Wars books in 3-packs for a bunch of years. So
yeah, I think you did hit it on the head when you said that if it wasn't for the Marvel 3-packs and probably the success of Star Wars and in some aspects of it, they probably would have been bought or closed their doors before that.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's definitely, they would have been done. Their door. I mean, well, they wouldn't have closed. Whitman Comics would have closed their door. Like the smiley face when we're looking at the logos right here.
Yep.
The planet with Whitman circle on it probably wouldn't have. Western Printing probably wouldn't have. But Dell, Gold Key, and Whitman Comics, yeah, done. All those, that's all gone there. And then now you've just become a regional printer / distributor.
Yep.
So, yeah. All right. Well, that's another one in the books, I think. We kept this one in time limit too, so that's really good. Did you have anything else you wanted to add real quickly?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much hit everything.
Mm-hmm. I do too. All right, so feel free if you guys any topics you want us to cover, no matter how minute you might think they are.
Yeah, we do have a couple that we think we're going to do in the future, but Marco likes to keep them under wraps until we actually put them out.
Yeah. We're always open for suggestions, but yeah, we like to go at our own pace. We probably next week. Well, I'm not going to say that because I always commit to doing it and then I never do it. So, but thank you again for everybody. Thank you, Eric, for putting this stuff together. I thoroughly enjoy this. This is like it's almost therapeutic and fun to talk about this stuff. So I enjoy doing
fun.
I
hope everybody else enjoys what little bit of information we can give them.
Yeah, we appreciate the feedback. You guys have been great. Thank you very much for watching and tuning in. And we will catch you hopefully in 2 weeks, but probably a month. See you next time on Back Issues.